So let's look at some of the rules for making current reality tree. So this is how a current reality tree looks like. You have undesirable effects all over, connected through cause and effect connections, and a root cause or a core problem at the bottom. Undesirable effects are ongoing problems that exist in your reality because of which the performance is affected. So they are generally known to people who belong to that particular function. So they are generally symptoms or problems or malfunctions at a localized level. And it is easier for people to express the undesirable effects concerning their function, their department. Let's look at some of the criteria for writing undesirable effects. So first rule that we typically follow for writing undesirable effects is that a UDE should be written in simple and full sentences. So avoid writing things like high inventory. Say the full thing, which is, for example, distributor has high inventory. The second criteria for undesirable effect is that don't talk about future tense. Talk about something that the system experiences currently. So it's not a predicted consequence, but it is something that the system is currently experiencing. So instead of saying I will have low profit, which is something that is expected to happen in the future, talk about something that is happening in the current reality. So say if profit is low, obviously you have to check whether the profits are low, then only you should write it. The third criteria for writing a UDE is that it should not be some one-off thing. More importantly, it should have a significant negative impact on the system's performance. So just because the courier services are supposed to reproduce their ID proof at the time of delivery of goods, it could be an inconvenience. It doesn't necessarily make it a UDE. So rather than saying express courier demands ID proof at the time of delivery of goods, which may not have a very significant negative effect, it is better to have a UDE which has a significant effect. For example, distributors have a slow and non-moving inventory. This is a good UDE because this is something distributors are facing and it seems to be a significant problem, at least to the distributors. As I was talking about earlier, it's not a rare occurrence. It's not something that is one-off thing. It is something that happens regularly and has a significant negative effect. So for example, if I say supplies were disturbed due to labor strike, and if labor strike is not a frequent thing, then I think this probably doesn't qualify as a UDE. I think labor availability is always low. Could be a reasonably good undesirable effect because it's something that is happening on a regular basis. Now, three of the other criteria which are generally the hardest for people to follow when they make a tree is, the first one is that whenever we write a UDE, it should not be a sentence that assigns blame to anybody. So for example, when we say vendors always delays the supplies, this is a direct blame, and notice that some of these people might be required to get their agreement off when we are making the tree, when we are presenting the tree. So it's important that we write it in a tone in which nobody feels blamed. So rather than saying vendors always delay the supplies, it is better framed as supplies are always delayed. So the real issue is supplies not being received on time rather than necessarily blaming vendors for it. As I was mentioning, the other criteria which is sometimes hard to stick to is an undesirable effect which is being presented as a solution, a hidden solution. So for example, when I say we don't have an ERP system, typically the solution is implied in this undesirable effect. So somewhere somebody is probably implying that if you had an ERP system, we probably wouldn't have some of the problems that we're observing in the current system. So be careful, talk about the real issue rather than saying that I don't have an ERP system. It's probably better to frame it as a problem of not having the required information. So rather than saying we don't have an ERP system, I think it's better to say needed information is not available on time. So it's the lack of information that is the real issue, not the lack of ERP system. And the last criteria that we follow is that whatever UDE you are writing, there should be something that can be done about it. Okay? So, for example, when somebody says people die due to old age, or that at the top of Mount Everest there is lack of oxygen, this doesn't constitute as a UDE. This is probably better written as a fact of life, something that one cannot just change. Okay? So it's better to differentiate between what are the complaints, what are the UDEs, with something which is a fact of life. Okay? So now let us look at some of the rules which we refer to as categories of legitimate reservations. These rules are required for us to make a sound tree. Now, what is a sound tree? Something that is sound is essentially a tree that conveys the idea that the presenter wants to convey without necessarily creating any sort of a bias or without creating any sort of a confusion. And these rules are necessary because otherwise it's my logic versus your logic. So when you are making a presentation, we need some sort of rules that help us to make the tree in a logically correct fashion. Now, these rules can be used by somebody to make the tree, or these rules can be used by somebody who is in the audience to critique a tree. Now, there are 8 such rules that Goldratt defines, and these rules I'm going to take you through one by one. The first mistake that most of the trees have is with regards to the clarity. So, what's the clarity? Reservation. So, clarity reservation happens when the listener is not able to comprehend what exactly the presenter is trying to present. Now, this is a problem that I see with most of the trees. The meaning that the presenter is trying to talk about is not necessarily what the audience is getting out of the presentation. So, this is the most common problem in the current reality trees that many of the participants make. And clarity reservation happens probably in my own experience, probably about 60 to 70% of problems are related to clarity. So it's not necessarily a wrong logic that is being presented, but probably the audience doesn't even understand what is exactly being presented. Okay? Many times clarity reservation happens because people are presenting a logic which is too far-fetched for the audience to understand. Okay? So let's look at an example that Goldratt talks about. Okay? So if you see this clarity problem clearly over here. Okay? So if you just started marketing abroad, then sales are going down. Okay? Now if you think about this, doesn't probably make sense to you as an audience. Okay? So it could be clear to the presenter, but it's not necessarily very clear to the audience. Okay? Instead of presenting this logic like this, I think it is better if I explain all the things that go into this cause and effect logic. So rather than just saying that just because we started marketing abroad, sales are going down, I think the full logic probably would look something like this. If we have just started marketing abroad, then we transferred some salespersons abroad. If we transferred some salespersons abroad, then sales domestically are down. Now notice, if we have just started marketing abroad, sales abroad aren't significant yet. If sales domestically are down and if sales abroad aren't significant yet, then total sales are down. This is a much more clearer explanation of that long arrow that we just presented in the previous case. So this is a problem that many of you might face, that when you present a cause and effect, the arrow itself is not very clear. So it's not necessarily that somebody is disagreeing with you. It is more likely the case that they don't even understand. So basically be careful of the long arrows. Long arrows are very difficult for the audience to understand, and when you use a long arrow like this, agreement becomes very difficult to get. So next time when you see somebody disagreeing with you, remind yourself that they probably don't disagree with you. They look like they're disagreeing with you, but most of the time they probably don't even understand what you are really trying to imply. So this is what is referred to as a clarity reservation. Let's move on to the next one. This reservation is referred to as entity existence. Now, many times we claim things that don't even exist. So, this is another problem that you would observe in many of the current reality trees. People have entities that they haven't observed necessarily in their system. Okay? So, entity existence also refers to the problem of claiming something without verification. So this generally happens because somebody didn't bother to check the data, check the physical evidence of it, and then they claim something. Now let me first present to you one example of how entity existence many times appears. So let's look at this claim first. If quality, then sales are going down. So clearly, first and foremost, remember we have to write full sentences. Second thing, do check whether sales are really going down. Okay. So entity existence is something that requires you to do a basic check of whether something that you've observed or whether something that you are claiming to have observed is really happening out there on the ground. The third reservation that you would come across is referred to as causality existence. So as the name suggests, causality existence refers to the problem of claiming something which is linked by cause and effect logic. And the logic itself might be erroneous. How do we check for causality existence? We use the standard technique of using if then. We say it out loud using if then, and if the cause and effect makes sense, then I think in most cases you will be able to catch if there is any error. Okay? So let's look at this one example. If I stop watering the lawn, then the grass dies. I think this seems to be a reasonably good cause and effect connection. Problem sometimes starts with causality existence when you have intangible causes. Okay? So for example, let's look at this one. Okay? If the market's taste has changed, then sales are going down. Okay? Now, if the cause is intangible, I will be little careful when I make a claim because the cause is intangible, it is difficult to observe it, and then it becomes difficult to claim the causality. So in such cases, it is recommended that if you are bringing in an intangible cause, please also bring in another effect other than the one that you are claiming. So this is what I would like to probably see out there. If the market taste has really changed, then not only should sales be going down, we should also witness a comparable increase in the sales of an alternative product. So generally speaking, I tend to avoid using intangible entities in my current reality trees. But if you must use must use an intangible cause, then at least bring in multiple evidences. In fact, why only for intangible causes? Even for tangible causes, ideally you should be bringing in multiple evidences of the effects, of the predicted effects. Let's look at a few more. So the fourth problem that you sometimes see in the trees is related to cause insufficiency. So what it really means is that what is being presented as the cause is insufficient on its own to result in the effect. So let's look at this one. If our competitors improve their product offering, then sales are going down. I think it looks okay, but something feels incomplete. I think the better verbalization would be something like this. If our competitors improved their product offering, and if we have not improved our product offering, then sales are going down. So generally speaking, you might have some supporting statement, some supporting assumption connected through an AND connector, and both of them are necessary for you to have the effect. Now many times what happens, people do think about such multiple causes that need to coexist with the original claim cause for the effect to happen. But sometimes they overdo this thing. So for example, if I say, if I go out in the rain, then I get wet. I think clearly this is not sufficient. I think probably it would be more appropriate to say that if I go out in the rain and if I don't have an umbrella, then I get wet. But then some people start overdoing it. If I go out in the rain and if I don't have an umbrella, and if it is raining water, and if we are on earth, and if gravity pulls everything down, I think there are too many explanations and many of them are redundant. I think we can safely assume some of those causes to be there in the background. We don't need to always explicitly talk about it. Look at one example like this. If you have source of ignition, and if you have fuel, and if you have oxygen, then we have fire. Now in most cases, it is safe to assume that we have oxygen, that we are on this particular planet where oxygen is in ample quantity. So avoid looking for too many such causes which can be assumed to be there. We don't have to explicitly talk about them all the time. Okay. Let's look at another problem that many of the trees have. This refers to the additional cause reservation. What is being implied over here is you haven't captured all the possible independent causes that can result in an effect. Okay. So for example, if I say if there's a downturn in the economy, then sales are going down. I think this by itself is not the only factor that would result in sales are going down. Probably I think what is more appropriate is to say if there is a downturn in the economy or if a new competitor has entered a market, then sales are going down. So notice there is no ring over here. This is just to denote that this is not an AND connection, this is an OR connection. So each of these two causes can independently result in the effect. In fact, if they are present, then probably the effect's magnitude will be more. Again, you would see here either or. That is how you know that you're talking about an additional cause, sort of a reservation. Okay. Let's move on to the next one. This is called cause and effect reversal. Now, as the name suggests, this is a mistake that students make when they have reversed what is cause, what is effect. Okay. So let's look at an example. If I have a pain in my abdomen and if my body temperature is higher than normal, then I have appendicitis. Now this looks okay when I say it like this, but you would notice that it's not the pain in abdomen and the fever that is causing appendicitis. It is probably the other way around. I think it is the appendicitis that is resulting in pain and the higher body temperature. So many times we confuse the order in which we come to a diagnosis. We confuse the order in which we come to a diagnosis with the actual cause and effect. So many times the doctor will ask you for some symptoms and from there they will conclude that you have appendicitis. So they are coming to this process of abduction where they have come to this conclusion that you might have appendicitis based on some symptoms. But those symptoms are not the causes of appendicitis, they are actually the effects of appendicitis. So be careful about this, and many times you have to reverse the statements to check whether we are presenting them in the correct fashion. Let's look at this effect, predicted effect related problem, which I had briefly touched upon earlier. If you really have appendicitis, then just don't bring one evidence of having pain in the abdomen. I think ideally you should be looking for some other effects that will come with appendicitis, which is like higher temperatures, probably also elevated WBC count. And if these two are not there, then it is probably wrong to claim that you have appendicitis. So this is that predicted effect related problem. Ideally, if you want to avoid this mistake, always try to bring in more than one effect for one cause. And especially if you're dealing with intangible causes, please be even more careful. Okay? So if quality has deteriorated is the claim, which is resulting in sales declining. If this is the claim, primary claim, I think look for some other effects. For example, if quality has really deteriorated, then customers' complaints should have increased. Warranty claims should have increased. If you're observing them, then probably to some extent there is some truth in this cause and effect claim. There could be other examples. For example, if customers don't like our product, then sales are decreasing. If customers really don't like our product, then we should see returns of our products in great numbers. We should also see increase in sales of the competitor's product, which is similar to ours. So whenever you're dealing with intangible causes, just be very, very careful. Okay. So again, similar examples. Let's come to the last one and probably the most difficult one for the beginners to spot. This is called circular logic, and this is truly the most problematic logic that one can come up with. What is tautology or circular logic? This is a problem where the effect itself is being offered as the rationale for the existence of the cause. So the fact that you just observed an effect, you repeatedly say the effect as the proof of the existence of the cause. So it typically happens when you have intangible causes that come into your tree and you have only one effect, you don't have any other verifiable effect. So let's look at some examples of it. So when somebody says, if our sales effort was insufficient, then sales are going down. And if that's the only thing that they are presenting, and if you ask them, how do you know that that the effort was insufficient from a sales team that resulted in sales going down? And if somebody replies to this like this, they say, well, I know the sales effort was insufficient because sales went down, didn't they? So now realize that the person has just restated the original claim in a different way, and that itself is being presented as the rationale for the causality. So be careful. This is something that many of your colleagues, many of your bosses might use against you. The effect itself is being presented as the existence of the cause or the causality, and this becomes difficult to spot for many people. Okay? So let's look at another example. Okay? Our team lost because they played poorly. So how do you know that they really played poorly? Well, the rationale that is being presented now is they lost the game, didn't they? You can again spot a circularity in this particular example. So causality is not probably being investigated, and people just keep repeating the same thing. This is something you will see in a lot of news programs. People restate the same thing in different ways and expect the audience to just accept the cause and effect logic that is being presented. Let's look at one last example. There's a very common saying that if you wear a garlic around your neck and if you sleep with a cross, vampires stay away. Okay? Now, if you make such a claim and somebody asks you, what's the proof that whatever you're saying makes any sense? Okay? To which your response is, well, I slept yesterday with garlic wrapped around my neck, and I also was wearing a cross, and well, I don't have any bite marks today. Don't you think this is proof enough of my claim? Now, this is a ridiculous claim, and obviously this is something that is an example of circular logic. You will notice that in many cases it's not very easy to spot. To summarize, all these 8 problems, which are referred to as categories of legitimate reservation, there is a list of these, and Detmer gives a very beautiful summary of all the problems that we just talked about. You may want to keep this handy for you whenever you're drawing a tree, so that you can avoid some of these mistakes. And if you're presenting it to somebody, I think it is a good idea to first check your own tree for all these 8 problems before you go out to present this to a large number of people somewhere in the audience. So thank you so much.